What if intelligence isn't always loud? It doesn't always look like being the smartest person in the room, answering every question first, or knowing everything. Sometimes, a highly intelligent mind is revealed by behaviors so subtle that most people completely overlook them. The way you handle silence, the way you change your opinion, the questions you ask, even the things you choose not to say. And here's the interesting part. You might already be doing some of these things without realizing what they say about the way your mind works. So, let's look at 8 quiet behaviors that can reveal a highly developed mind. 1. You're comfortable saying, I don't know. One of the most underrated signs of intellectual strength is being able to admit when you don't know something. Think about it. A person who desperately wants to appear intelligent has a reason to pretend they know everything. But a curious mind has a different priority. It wants the truth more than it wants to look impressive. When you say, I don't know, you're leaving space for something new to enter your mind. You can ask a question. You can investigate. You can listen. You can change your understanding. This is closely related to intellectual humility, the ability to recognize the limits of your own knowledge. And that's important because intelligence isn't simply about how much information you have. It's also about knowing when your information isn't enough. So if you're comfortable saying, I don't know yet, that yet can be more powerful than pretending you already have the answer.
2. You change your mind when the evidence changes. Some people treat changing their opinion like losing a battle. Once they've said something publicly, they feel pressured to defend it, even when new evidence appears. But a flexible mind doesn't work that way. Imagine you strongly believe something. Then you discover information that challenges your belief. You have 2 choices. You can protect your ego or update your understanding. Intelligent thinking requires the second one. This doesn't mean highly intelligent people constantly change their opinions. It means they don't treat being wrong as a threat to their identity. They can say, I used to think that, but now I see it differently. That's not weakness, that's mental flexibility. Because the goal of thinking isn't to win every argument. The goal is to get closer to what's actually true. And sometimes getting closer to the truth requires leaving an old belief behind. 3. You ask questions that go deeper. There's a huge difference between asking for information and asking to understand something. A shallow question might be, what happened? A deeper mind might ask, why did it happen? Then, what caused that? And then, what would have to change for the opposite result to happen? That's how curiosity becomes powerful. Highly curious people don't always stop at the first explanation. They keep digging. They look for connections between ideas. They notice patterns. They question assumptions that everyone else accepts automatically. And sometimes this can make them seem annoying, because while everyone else is ready to move on, they're still asking, but why? That simple question has driven some of humanity's biggest discoveries. So if your mind naturally wants to go beneath the surface, that's not necessarily overthinking. Sometimes it's simply curiosity refusing to stop at the easiest answer. 4. You can enjoy being alone without feeling empty. There's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the painful feeling of being disconnected. Solitude is choosing to spend time with yourself. And for some people, being alone creates the perfect environment for thinking. No conversation to follow, no social performance, no need to react immediately. Just your own thoughts. You might read, walk, listen to music, think about an idea, work on something, or simply sit there doing nothing for a while. That doesn't automatically mean someone is more intelligent, but the ability to spend time alone comfortably can create space for reflection, creativity, and independent thinking. Because when you're constantly surrounded by other people's opinions, it's easy to confuse their thoughts with your own. Sometimes you need silence to discover what you actually think, and that's why some people don't fear being alone. They use it. 5. You listen more than you speak. You've probably noticed something interesting in conversations. The person talking the most isn't necessarily the person thinking the most. Some people speak because they want attention, others speak because they want to contribute, and some people listen because they're genuinely trying to understand. Active listening requires mental effort. You have to pay attention to what someone is saying. You have to process it. You have to notice what they mean, not just what they literally said. And sometimes you have to resist the urge to immediately prepare your own response. That's difficult because our brains naturally want to participate. But a person who can listen carefully can collect information before making a judgment. They may notice details that everyone else missed. And here's something worth remembering. You don't have to prove you're intelligent in every conversation. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is simply listen. 6. You notice contradictions. Most people naturally look for information that confirms what they already believe, but a curious mind can become fascinated by contradictions. For example, someone says they hate attention, but constantly seeks approval. A person claims they don't care about money, but talks about it every day. Someone says they want change, but repeatedly chooses the same behavior. These contradictions don't necessarily mean someone is fake. Human beings are complicated. We can believe one thing and behave differently, and noticing that complexity requires attention. Highly analytical people often enjoy looking for the gap between what is said and what actually happens, not to judge everyone, but to understand. They ask, what explains this? What am I missing? Could both things be true in a different situations? This is one reason intelligent thinking isn't always about finding simple answers. Sometimes it's about becoming comfortable with complicated ones. 7. You don't need to win every argument. Imagine someone disagrees with you. Your first instinct might be to prove them wrong. But what if you stopped and asked, why do they believe this? That one question changes the entire conversation. Instead of preparing an attack, you're trying to understand another perspective. And sometimes you may discover that the disagreement isn't actually about facts. Maybe you have different experiences, different priorities, different definitions, or different assumptions. A mature mind can separate disagreement from personal identity. You can disagree with someone without needing to destroy their argument. You can defend your position without becoming emotionally attached to being right. And sometimes, you can simply say, that's an interesting perspective. Then move on. Because intelligence isn't measured by how many arguments you win. Sometimes it's measured by how much unnecessary conflict you're able to avoid. 8. You're constantly curious about your own mind. This may be the most important one. You don't just observe the world, you observe yourself. You notice your reactions, you question your habits. You wonder why certain situations make you angry, why certain people affect you, why you keep repeating certain patterns, why you procrastinate on something you genuinely care about, why you suddenly lose interest, why your mood changes. Instead of simply saying, that's just how I am, you ask, why am I like this? That question creates self-awareness, and self-awareness gives you something incredibly valuable, the ability to examine your own thinking, because your brain isn't an objective machine. It has biases, emotions, shortcuts, past experiences, assumptions. And sometimes it can convince you that your first interpretation is the truth. A reflective person learns to pause and examine that interpretation. Not every thought deserves to be believed. Not every emotion needs to become an action. And not every habit has to remain a permanent part of your identity. Sometimes intelligence isn't about knowing more. It's about becoming better at questioning yourself. Conclusion. So let's go back to the beginning. Intelligence doesn't always announce itself. It can look like saying, I don't know. It can look like changing your mind, asking one more question, listening instead of interrupting, enjoying your own company, noticing contradictions, walking away from pointless arguments, or becoming curious about your own behavior. And remember, None of these behaviors can prove that someone is highly intelligent on their own. Human intelligence is far too complicated to fit into 8 habits, but if several of these behaviors sound familiar, they may reveal something interesting about the way you approach information, uncertainty, people, and your own thoughts. And perhaps that's the real sign of an intelligent mind. Not believing that you already know everything, but staying curious enough to realize how much there is still to learn. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel for more psychology, human behavior, and fascinating insights into the mind. Because the more you understand your mind, the harder it becomes for your mind to control you without you noticing.